بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
وعليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Dear viewers, welcome to our community. Just like last week, we came with the same topic, which is faith and life. I think it's very interesting. A lot of people actually asked me to do part 2. So we tried to talk about life as a religious life and our faith as well. Does our faith means to what does it mean to us? And the people who are watching, what does it mean to you? So we'll speak to our guests and try to bring us something out. So let me introduce our guest tonight. We have a youth worker from Feast, Mark Hetzing. Welcome to our show, sir.
Thank you, Ishaq. Very pleased to be with you.
Thank you very much. And we also have Brother Azizul Kareem, and he's accountant. So if I could ask Brother Aziz or Mark, let's start with Mark. Mark, when we say faith and life, what does that mean to you?
Well, everything. I can't separate them at all. You know, they're two words that have to be interconnected. Because as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, everything I do has an impact in terms of my conduct, the way that I relate to other people, the way that I relate to my God. So it's absolutely fundamental. So there's no disconnection at all for me. It's everything. So yeah.
Achha. Same thing to you, Aziz Bhai. When we say faith and life, so what does it mean to you?
So basically, Jazakallah khair, thank you for inviting me to the show, and the old friend Mark as well. Faith basically dictates someone's life. For example, when I do eat halal meat, right? For example, just to give you a basic example, when I eat halal meat, why I'm eating halal meat? Just because of my faith. So this is a component of my faith, right? So my faith is connected to my life. So all of the decision I would make, I would say what my faith dictates and what my faith not dictates, means what are the prohibition and allowable, right? So simplistically, there is a line drawn in my life, what can I do, and that is godly command, we believe. So faith and life are interrelated each other, just like Mark mentioned as well. So I mean, we are no difference in that.
So what we see in which some people would say, we live in a Britain, we are proud to be a British, we live here because we like that place. So people would say we live in a Britain which is almost like a godless, that people don't talk about faith, people don't talk about God. You will find probably 5% of the people regular prayers on Sundays. So it's a big, chunk of people then interested in faith. So what do you think is the problem? What are we doing? Are we doing something wrong? Are we not?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point, Ishaq. I tend to think that we talk a lot about this word spirituality rather than religion these days. So what we are talking about here is we're talking about perhaps people not going to a place of worship, whether that be a Christian church or a mosque or a Gurdwara or any other form of religious establishment. But I think generally there is still interest in spirituality, in is there a God? Fundamental questions. I think also people are, if I'm honest, and I think this has always been the case, they're searching in the wrong places. So actually, perhaps they are tired of what we call established or institutional religion, where we're talking about going to a place, being part of a community. But I think people still crave community. We were just talking off air before about the fact that genuinely we are parts of communities which do care about one another. There's lots of examples where that doesn't seem to be the case in our world, in our communities, but we still crave community, and I think people are trying to find that, whether they're finding that through gym membership, whether they're looking at that through football or sport, or perhaps family or not family. I still think people they're searching for meaning and hope, and that's certainly my reading of a lot of people. I find that I've had lots of opportunities actually to talk to people about faith, because you know, you and I, we bleed when we get wounded. Where, you know, and everybody that we meet, by virtue of their human condition, are, you know, experiencing problems, perhaps not in the exact same way as us, but they have problems that come up in life. So I think generally there is still a search for meaning, but as has always been the case, I think people are looking in the wrong places.
Okay, same question to Aziz Bhai. If, you know, when we say it's a godless society, would that be a fair thing to say? Because people are saying it, and people are, some people are proud to say it as well.
Yeah, I think in certain degree, because when we say believer of the God, worshipper of the God, that should be implemented through the action. So if your action doesn't dictate or doesn't represent, that means you actually are in a godless community, because I mean, action define a purpose. So for example, if I say I'm a believer of God, and if I do nothing, then am I be actually a worshipper of God or not? So that actually says that, you know, yeah, this is, if we look at the churches, and even also, you know, a lot of Muslims don't go to the mosque and pray, and in churches, of course, they also, they don't have many people in the churches, as you know, many people actually assign themselves as a Muslim and a Christian, but of course, when it comes to the duty towards God, then we are separated from each other, right? Means from the religious institution, for the devotion of, so on that respect, I would say yes, it's a godless community, because the idea is the faith they're holding on a belief system, but when it comes to operation on internalize and practicing upon an institutional base, it is missing.
But do you think people make their judgment based on knowledge, or do you think people don't have knowledge, they're just going on with the flow, that we don't need God, or we don't need faith, we don't need religion? Do you think they made whatever the judgment they made, do you think they made it based on knowledge? What do you think? Because can you imagine, we're talking about someone who created me,
Sure.
the one who created the universe,
Sure.
and we're neglecting him. You know, it's quite strange.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, again, I think it's down to people's personal experiences. You know, growing up, you know, have they had what I've described as a positive perspective on faith? Have they seen examples from their own families of people going on in their faith and actually living out their faith in a real and a way that has integrity? And I think my experience of working with young people has been that they're going through a lot of questioning, which I think is part of healthy growing up anyway. That young people are always going to question and doubt. I think that's part of you know, us in our identity formation, but I think also it has to do with the people they see around them.
So imagine if I ask you, just for understanding, so when you say we acknowledge God, right? So what does God mean to you? Can you describe God?
Yeah, I mean, as a follower of Jesus, as a Christian, I would describe God as love. God is love. That is foundational to my understanding. Now, again, we had a discussion about this previously, you know, about what we mean by love, but fundamentally, we would describe, and our understanding from Scripture is that, you know, that God demonstrates love, you know, he through the creation. You know, the act of creation was in and of itself an act of love. It was, you know, he made this creation for our enjoyment and for us to be able to flourish in, and it's a beautiful place which has been clearly tarnished in the course of time by the decisions that human beings have made. But at the same time, I see beauty in creation, whether that be the natural world or whether I see it through the friendship that, you know, that we enjoy as human beings here together today. I think that's absolutely, you know, foundational here. So as a Christian,
when you say God is love,
yeah.
I mean, is that an object or what? It's just a description?
No, love's an action. Love's an action. It's a characteristic.
But does he also punish?
I believe that God has to. We would see the exercise of free will. As a Christian, there is a sense in which we're not controlled. There's a sense in which we have freedom to kind of like express the love that God has given us, but there comes responsibility, and therefore God will look at our actions and will judge us on our actions as well. So in that respect, as a Christian, I believe that one day there will be a judgment, that you know, that I will be asked to account for what I've done in this life. But fundamentally, you know, because I believe in a gracious God too,
Okay.
that means that again, as a Christian, because I'm a follower of Jesus, I look to him as an example, and how much have I aligned myself with his will in terms of the way I live out my faith. You know, and I account for that to
So if
God,
someone asks you a question like, if God is love, also God is a punisher for wrongdoings, wouldn't that be, you have said, you keep saying love, but you don't talk about the punisher. So soon as someone comes into it and say, oh, does he also punish? I don't want to be part of it, because it's not been informed. So if he says to, if you're inviting him, he would say, why did you use one line instead of two lines? Why are you hiding the punish away from God's quality? One of the qualities is God that he will punish if you do wrong. And I think it's just to do it as well. If you rape someone, if you kill someone,
Sure.
you shouldn't be loved. You should be, you hurting someone.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so in the Christian gospel, we talk about God being a God of grace and a God of mercy and a God of forgiveness. There's an acknowledgement there that, you know, if people are in a position, are willing to actually come before God and to ask for his forgiveness, that there is, and the relationship with Christ is then becomes at the forefront of that person's decision making to follow Christ, then there is definitely opportunity for change, you know, irrespective of what they've done. And that sounds shocking at one level, but that is an element of that. And I would go to somebody like the Apostle Paul, for example, who was an incredibly religious human being, who was somebody that kind of like followed a lot of the religious rules, and he was somebody that did punish and did murder. As a consequence of his religiosity. That's one example. At the other end of the extreme, you can think of somebody that you know had lived a life which basically says, you know, I'm going to disregard God completely, and perhaps they are involved in, you know, sort of criminality, or they're involved in some other way in which they ignore God. I think, you know, what does that demonstrate? Well, you could say, well, God should be, you know, quite rightly able to say no. You know, you're not part of a relationship with me, and yet God acts graciously.
Thank you. If I could go to Aziz, but Aziz, we believe that Islam is not a new religion. We've been saying that for a very long time. I don't know if people believe us or not. That we following Abrahamic faith, which is started from the first of man, Adam alayhi salam, peace be upon them all. So Prophet Muhammad is the last of the prophet, that he didn't bring a new religion. He actually confirming the other religion. And fundamental things are same. You know, so if you could describe God, how do you believe in God? And why do you believe the way you believe?
First of all, belief in God is a rational. We can come to a rationality. If we apply rationality, we come to a conclusion. There is an existence of the Creator, and Quran affirmed this by using directly saying, "Am I not your God, who created that?" So this is one type of argument. And another type of argument, of course, Quran mentioned that "Am khuliqu min ghayri shay'in am humul khaliqun, am khalaqu as-samawati wal ardi bal la yuqinun," where they created by nothing, or they themselves are the creator, or rather they are not certain. So there is three proposition here. So can something come from nothing? So nothingness doesn't exist in reality, it's just a term. Then the following proposition, Allah is asking, can something self-create? Means it creates itself. Can I give birth to myself? Can this cup, you know, give birth to the same cup? Because it's a contradictory, because it has to exist before its existence, right? It cannot be possible. So then the default option is we eliminated the idea. Now we left with default idea that God exists, right? Now, of course, I tend to come with many atheists and they say, okay, how can you say that object is God or whatever you define? So are you saying because of absence of proving God, are you saying this is God? I said no, because do you believe that the universe created with strength and power? And the person would agree, and they would say, and I followed with the same question, that do you think the one who created the universe is all wise? Do you think the creator, the one who created everything, he knows everything and wise, and he has all the ability to be a magnificent creator? And then they kind of agree. And then if you look at these, the definition of God in Islam, we find from Asmaul Husna that Allah is all powerful, all knowing, and he has those attributes. If you don't have these attributes, you won't be able to create this world. So therefore, rationally, it convinced me, first of all. And so this is a rational proof. As an intellectual mind, whoever are looking into Islam, they can look into it. So the God existence arguments are in the Quran, and every page actually open you. Quran is talking to you. Whoever, if a non-Muslim or a Muslim speak to Quran, and Allah is telling His presence. Sometimes saying Allah deliberately saying Qul huwa Allahu ahad, say He is Allah the one. So Allah is telling I am one, as if like someone is calling you from the next door. So when someone call you from the next door, Brother Ishaq, right? Would you say there's someone is not there? Would you say that? No. You won't say that. No. Because you can hear the sound. When I call Mark, he can't say I don't exist. Because first of all, you say, oh, if let's say he can't see me and I'm calling from the other room, he cannot deny the sound. That sound leads to me there is someone there, right? So similarly, so the creation, itself is a sign and the stamp of God, because it cannot self-create and it cannot come from nothing. So therefore it relies on, so it's a very, our faith is based on rationality. And then this is supported by the prophets. Like, if imagine you are working in a warehouse, and there is a guy came at 9 o'clock, a certain date, and a weekend, 9 o'clock. He has a t-shirt and a certain logo and a certain message. You saw this guy. Maybe 3 hours later, there is another guy came from with a similar logo, similar t-shirt, and all throughout the day you met 7 people with the same logo, same message. Your conclusion would be they are coming from the same company. So if you look at this example, we look at the example of the prophet. All of those prophets came in. A lot of the prophet actually did not see one another. So, for example, Moses never seen Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Jesus never met Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But again, some prophets came with another prophet, like Moses and Harun, they are together. John the Baptist, the Yahya and Jesus, they were in the same time, so they seen each other. But there are a lot of prophets, they have not seen each other. But if you look at, they came into different times. And all of this time, the message is consistent. That means this source of the message are the unique, which is the
one place.
One place, but the unique, yeah.
Okay, we'll go to Prophet afterward. Can you describe me God? What are the qualities do you need to be, the God needs to have? I mean, if we're saying, what I'm trying to do is, I want to know what Moses believed, what Abraham believed, what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam believed, because we said it's one religion. I want to see if there's any differences between. So if you could give me a few quality of God and see if there are differences.
If you look at who God is and what God does, so there is a 2 segment here. God is the one who, so I said 2 segment, who is God and what God does. Okay. So God does what God befits Him. So for example, if someone say, can God drink water? I would say no. So does it mean that God can't drink water? I said no, He can drink water, but does it suit Him? So if He drinks water, it makes Him dependent on things. So if we say what God does, that a lot of the action, if God does, it will make Him ungodly. God must hold His godly character all the time. He cannot be like perfect in one time and imperfect at the same time. He is knowledgeable in one time, He can't be ignorant all the time. So this is what God does and what suits Him. So for example, if someone say, can God come down and he becomes a giraffe. I would say he can do that, but it doesn't suit him, because the time he was, he's all powerful, all knowing, and he has all this attribute. The moment he is becoming downing himself, so he's become perfect to imperfect, and the imperfectness cannot go with the God. So we would say, yeah, God can do anything, but you do whatever suits him. That's one. Who God is? Now the question is, God is someone who he must be one, because there's multiple God. If you say multiple God, Quran gives the idea, لَوْ كَانَ فِيهِمَا آلِهَةٌ إِلَّا اللَّهُ لَفَسَدَتْ. Had there been more than one creator, then universe would have chaos and corruption. Means like two prime ministers cannot be at the same time coexist together, because it would, we will have an issue with who should control what, right? So God is someone who is one and who is unlike anything, right? For example, we cannot say God is a statue or a camera or a cups, or these are the objects. So he's one, and then Quran defines that he never had a father. Means the way we human thinks, these are the creation, right? How we think creation. So God is giving the idea, you have a thinking mind of a creation. Do not put me on that bracket of creation. I am unlike that. So therefore, whoever said, many people say, oh, who created God? But then again, this is a mind of a creationist mind. God is saying, I am beyond the creation. So we cannot put him on that bracket.
Okay.
So I hope.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. That's brilliant. What we're trying to work out here is, because we just said before we start that only 5% of the people are worshipping God. Is there a meaning for worship? What does it mean to us? And what happens if people don't worship? What happens in your faith?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd like to say from a Christian perspective is that...
Well, if you want to also, I think Aziz said something about technically like Trinity. God doesn't become like humans or like statues or anything like that. He probably indicated in that level that God is one and he stays as he is. He doesn't become his creation in the same time. So I'm sure you have a difference of views on that.
Yeah, of course, and I would be a liar if I didn't say that there are differences of our understanding. I mean, we are monotheistic. We believe in one God, and we talk about God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. That doesn't mean to say that God was ever attributed any partners. And in that regard, our understanding of Jesus is that Jesus perfectly demonstrates, the character of God through his life. And as a Christian, we believe in his life and his death and his resurrection and his ascension, and the fact that he will one day come to judge the living and the dead. That they are fundamentals of what our belief system. So I absolutely have to kind of like explain that, as that's what I understand by sort of God's action through Christ. So in that regard, we talk a lot. We have a lot of emphasis about Jesus. Being somebody that was, that lived a life in the Middle East for some 33 years, during which he, if you like, experienced everything there was to be human, yet was without sin.
Do you pray to him? Do you worship?
Yeah, there is a sense in which I worship, yes, because within our scriptures there are a number of places in which it talks about worship worship, and the word in the Greek is proskuneo. So absolutely, we would make no distinction between the way that Christ represents God. That for us is absolutely at the centre of our faith. In regards to worship, therefore, Ishaq, I think it's really important to sort of emphasise that our spiritual act of worship, we call it that, is not just about what I do in church on a Sunday. It's a spiritual act of worship, which actually means that whatever I do in life, throughout my working week, throughout my social week, I am living a life of faith. That's a spiritual act of worship. So words have meaning in prayer, absolutely, and that's really important that that develops.
Brilliant.
But it's more than that.
Good. I'm going to come
so
back
much
to
more
you
than
on that because
Yeah.
worship needs to be explained properly so people
Yeah,
can
absolutely.
understand
I'd like to be able to do
We're
that
just
a
going to
bit
go for a
more.
small break. So
Yeah, sure.
Dear viewers, we're going to go for a small break. Stay with us. It's quite important to understand how they believe and how we believe. So, and this can link with us that we can work together. So don't go too far. I'll see you after the break. Wassalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. রহমতুল্লাহি ওয়া বারাকাতুহু আলহামদুলিল্লাহি রাব্বিল আলামিন সম্মানিত ভাই বোনেরা আপনার সবাইকে আবারও স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি we welcome you all to our community. We were talking about worship. We finished with Mark, but I'll go back to him again. I want him to explain a bit more, so at least it's been fair that he can explain to us as well. So Mark, we were talking about worship. Why is it difficult for people to understand worship in this community? All Europe, they don't understand what worship is. And like you said before, that you do pray to Jesus, you also worship Jesus. For us, it's just that new, so we were just trying to understand your input, so that we can relate instead of being ignorant. So when you say you worship Jesus, we all know as a Muslim that Jesus worshipped God. So isn't it like a flow now? It's like a double chin. He worships somebody and you're worshipping him. And we all know in our faith, your faith as well, that if you worship other than God, it's a blasphemy. And you end up in hell. So it's really pity. So if you could explain a bit more on that, and then we go to Aziz.
Yeah, I mean, so there are passages in our New Testament, in the Injil, in the Gospels, where there is a famous passage about sort of like, I and the Father are one. He talks about this sort of like, very close to his death, where there is an understanding that there is that Jesus perfectly represents the character of God, and he's consistently throughout sort of scriptures in the Injil and the other places challenged by the religious leaders at the time, who were God-fearing Jews. They had a Jewish tradition. They indeed aimed, if you like, ammunition at him and said, well, you are speaking blasphemy. He makes a statement in John's Gospel where he says before Abraham is I am. And whenever anybody said I am in Scripture, that was always perceived by the religious leaders as, well, you're claiming equality with God, something to be grasped. And so there's no denial that those are difficult scriptures to understand and appreciate, but taking them as a whole, and I have to do that, I had to take the Old Testament and the New Testament together. There is a demonstration that actually Jesus can sort of like if you like make claim, though he doesn't choose to actually say, well, I am the Messiah, I am the chosen one, I am the anointed one that was expected in Jewish scriptures. And therefore, for me, I make no distinction when I pray to Jesus. I am praying to the character of God, and in that regard, that gives me sort of like life and definition and meaning. So as I said to you before, worship is not just about the expression of prayer, but it's so much more than that. It's actually living in relationship with God. It's actually acknowledging the fact that God makes every kind of difference to my life. He is the creator, I am a created being. I need to rest because I'm not God. Even though our understanding of Genesis is that God rested on the seventh day, whatever you take that to mean in terms of like years, it's very evidently there. And our, if you like, our reason for being as human beings is about enjoying God's good creation, but above that is about worship of Him. And we worship him through the enjoyment of the creation that he's given us.
Yeah.
As a gift.
One more question here, then I'll finish off. Is your faith continuous from the Jewish faith? Is that the line you take, or just separate?
No, absolutely. It's a faith that comes out of Judaism. Okay. Absolutely right. It's a monotheistic faith. Our scriptures, if you like, the Old Testament is based on the prophets, the law and the prophets. So when you look at our Christian Bible, you will see Genesis through to the last of the so-called minor prophets. They are all there. The Torah we take seriously.
Do you know their beliefs? Say, imagine I've seen Moses.
Yeah.
So what do you think his belief was when it comes to God?
He was monotheistic. He was somebody that believed in one God. He believed in one God. You know, absolutely. I think about the other prophets, people like Ezekiel, Isaiah. We talk about any number of prophets that we can align and appreciate as Muslims and Christians. And he very definitely was somebody that lived a life of faith. He was declared righteous. Now that doesn't mean that he was without fault or without sin. He was somebody that followed God and definitely did make mistakes on the way through. But for us, you know, he is very much we're grafted into the Judaic faith. Absolutely right.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
As a Muslim, we believe that all the prophets are sinless. We believe they don't make any intentional sins.
Sure.
They might make maybe mistakes, for we can learn, because they're human beings also. So that's why we say they are sinless. That's what we believe, all the prophets. Peace be upon them all. When we say we follow the same religion as Adam alayhi salam, or the Ibrahim alayhi salam, the Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad, what does that mean? What do you mean by that?
So basically,
we have differences here.
So I think there is a degree of differences between the Christianity and Islam, and so when we look at Ibrahim alayhi salam and all the prophets, so we look into what they worshipped basically. So worship define who we should revere him as a god, because we don't worship through something that we don't define as a god. So how Prophet Abraham defined his God, because he given an analogy, because he saw star rises on the sky. So he says, this is the biggest things I can see in my eyes. So probably this is the God, right? The moment star faded away, he realized it can't be, because it suddenly disappeared itself. So now I cannot invoke that things. It was not static, right? It's moved, it's disappeared, it's gone, right? And then you know, he looked at the moon and he said, oh, it's bigger than star. You know, star is far away, and we see star like, you know, this size, right? And moon we can see like this size, right? Slightly bigger. He thought, okay, maybe that one. Now what he is doing, he is analyzing, you know, he is applying rationality, Prophet Abraham himself. And then he said, okay, that cannot be also my God, because it also disappear and also controlled. It look like it's controlled. Then he was so happy to see sun. He said, oh, might be this one. Then soon as it realized, it disappeared on the night time. He said, no, all of these things are actually controlled by someone. So I am turning my face away from those objects, and now I'm turning my face to the one who controls everything. So if we look at that angle from Abrahamic reasoning, then we can look everything in this world we labeled as creation, which is creation, few letters. Then we need to define God. Now question is why we define God. The reason why we define God is that, you know, so that our worship, you know, we can keep it on the direction, should not go to a misdirection. Imagine you are sleeping, and if I scream, you won't hear, right? If someone is dead, you know, he can't hear me. So that's why it's important to find who the God is first. And Prophet Abraham and all these people, you know, they actually find who the true God is. So why? So that, you know, their worship can go to the right place, not misdirected. So that's why if you look at Abraham, so Quran mentioned ما كان إبراهيم يهوديا ولا نصرانيا وكان حنيفا مسلما وأنا So basically, I forgot the full verse, but the paraphrasing is said that Abraham is neither a Jew nor a Christian, but he was a Hanif, a Muslim, and the one who submitted to the God. And when he says submitted to the God, he was rejecting the idols. And we know the stories. There are multiple gods there within that one true God in the sky, right? Then he rejected the idea, and he actually said to his father, a rational argument. So he saw his father is making a statue and then revering him and worshipping him. And he said, why do you ask this statue that it cannot even help himself? It is already a dead. How can you worship a dead? A creator should be alive all the time. If someone is absent or dead, they won't be able to hear. Worship means you ask for help, and your gratitude should go to that direction. If these things are dead, it's not going nowhere. So it is meaningless. So that's why Prophet Abraham...
So that's a Quranic story, right?
That's a Quranic story. And now the reason why, some stories you have to believe in it, but some story you can rationally, because we can see the logic in there, right? So someone can give you a story, very nice story, and it may not happen, it may happen, may not happen. But sometimes we cannot rationalize. But some stories, it has a moral in it, and we can rationalize. And as a simple mind, we can find out, yes, it is true logic. How can a dead thing can help me? So therefore, Prophet Abraham, and we look at all these prophets, and they have a similar battle, just like Prophet Muhammad. And that's why we are convinced that we are following the true Abrahamic faith. Because Abraham, the main idea of his belief, he first rejected. He didn't believe in first God. First he rejected the false God, which is half of our testimony, La ilaha. And then he accepted the true God, because imagine if I give you 10 balls here, let's say 10 plastic balls here, and I say there is one correct ball which is a red ball out of 10. I would easily take all the balls out, right?
The red.
And you will see the red. So what it does is, not only I see the red one, I also I have the conviction there is nothing left, no other choices left. So Islam gives a very rational idea, and that's why Quran goes and telling people, do you not reflect upon and think about it, So that's answer to your question about how we believe that Abrahamic faith is connected to Islam.
One more thing, there are lots of people actually praise or they worship statues. That's their faith.
Yeah.
So we're not disrespecting them. That's their faith. That's what they understood.
Yeah.
But this is how we understand things. We don't worship any statues. We worship the live one who created us. Worship. Mark explained very nicely about worship, what does worship mean. It's a way of lifestyle, isn't it? So what does worship means in your faith?
In Islam, we have some defined worship, and for example, we have to do 5 pillars in Islam, which is the mandatory function. Like I have to pray 5 times a day. I have to give charity. So these are defined one. These are the mandatory one. But by speaking to you, it's also worship. By speaking to him, it's also worship. And you can say how? Because God said to me, be kind to your fellow human being. Allah said in chapter 49 verse 13 that the better in the sight of God is the one who knows one another, who revere one another. So in paraphrasing, you be kind to your neighbor, you be kind to your fellow man, you kind to your whoever surround us, and give them their own right. So help them.
That means following his command is a worship.
Exactly. So for example, the guy given this drink, right? So what I do, I start with say Bismillah. When I say Bismillah, means that drink cannot be made by human being. This raw material we assemble together. We put tea bag there, we put water there, we put sugar there. Where does the sugar come from? Sugar cane. Who creates sugar cane? Can we create a sugarcane tree? No. It cannot grow itself. So therefore, when I say Bismillah in the name of Allah, so I am gratitude, showing thanks and reverence to the God. So every moment of our life, for example, if I go to a seaside, I say Alhamdulillah. That means I am going to enjoy the whatever God, but then again I shown my gratitude that yes, I am going to enjoy. Not only that, I acknowledge His bounty and grace towards me. So that is defined and undefined worship. So worship, I agree on with the label that the whole life is a worship. Because we cannot take a moment away from worship. Because if I don't lie, if I don't cheat, these Allah has commanded me. So if I follow it, it's a worship. So for example, I have some bad temptation, but because of the fear of God, I don't do it. So worship can be defined in many aspects. One is fear of God, one is reward from God, another is following God's commandments. So worship can be derived in many aspects. Some people love God, some people fear God, some people generally like to follow the commandment of God. So everyone has a different tech. But then again, worship is a comprehensive thing that you have to follow defined and undefined things.
Can I go to Mark? Thank you for your explanation. Very similar anyway, very similar things we're talking about. Mark, if we don't have faith, if you don't follow God, if you don't acknowledge God, how would we know that which is good and bad? Who decides that good and bad? Because there's some things you might like, I won't like it. There's something in this country people will like it, but in another country they won't like it. So who's wrong? It's people's choice. How can you say something you don't like and I like it? It's my choice, I like it. So how can we define without acknowledge from God that this is good or bad? We can't have an absolute no way that we're all going to agree on it. So we need something to define, but this is good or this is bad.
I mean, I guess I would start again. I would go right the way back to the beginning of our Christian scriptures, and again we're talking about the Torah. We're talking about Genesis, to the beginnings, if you like, and back to the creation account. And throughout the account of creation, you read that creation was created good. It was good, and whether that was male and female, he created them, or the cosmos, the stars and all the planets, or human beings, it was created good. And so there was that was woven into the universe. And I think if we kind of then run forward, there are demonstrations of human beings failing, of them falling into sin, which I've described as being, if you want to give a definition of what sin is from a Christian perspective, it will be a few things. It will be about falling short of a standard, of missing the mark, or sort of like stepping over the line, like you would do, say, if you went into a park and the sign said, "Don't step on the grass." So there are definitely a sense in which there is the presence of good and evil in our world, and I think what's very clear in our scriptures, going back to the Old Testament, is the whole idea about God setting eternity in the hearts of men in Ecclesiastes, which is one of the Judaic writings, which again sort of talks about the reality of what it means to be human, that we are made in God's image. That doesn't mean, incidentally, that when we think about being made in God's image, we're talking about sort of like any form of idol. What we're actually talking about us being sort of like, if you like, marked with God's stamp, if you like. In other words, that there's a sense in which our humanity does express and give definition to the character of a God who created us. So I think in that regard, there is a sense in which being human, is about us being, how shall I put it, having an awareness of good and evil. And I don't think that excludes people that don't have faith. I think my understanding, unless somebody comes from incredibly, what should we say, abusive background, where perhaps they don't know right from wrong, I think there is a sense in which the very fact that God has marked them with the mark of a human being means that they have some understanding of good and evil, understanding of morality, of ethics. And therefore, there is almost like an innateness which allows them to make decisions. Obviously, that's part of being parented and part of being in relationships, and everybody's experience of growing up in a family is different. But I think there is a sense.
So you would define your good or bad according to your book, isn't it?
Who would define it? Yeah,
if
well,
your faith say this is good, this is good. If
Yeah.
your faith say this is bad, right?
yeah.
But people who doesn't have faith,
Yeah.
where do they get the ideas from, good or bad? Do they follow us who have faith, or do they just come? Where do they get the information from that this is bad or this is good? If you ask someone who don't
Yeah.
have faith, can you marry an animal? He was, I don't know. How do you know it's bad? Who told you it's bad? Because some people do that as well, actually.
Sure, and I think with when we got to the internet these days, you know, people can kind of go on the internet and they can kind of like, you know, find any form of ideology, you know, that's out there. But I think the important thing here is that, you know, within a society that may not be defined as a religious society, and we think about UK Britain now, which is where we're living. I think there is still a sense in which there are kind of morals, there are ethics, which have been woven into society. We think about our justice system, for example. We think about, you know, some of the institutions that we have, like the health service. We think about, you know, the whole thing about the judicial system when it kind of does punish people for when they do wrong and sanction them. We have kind of a human rights charter. You know, which again, you know, is an important part of ethics.
Yeah, but I don't think any of this goes against the faith, to be honest.
No, sure.
Somehow the faith influenced them, isn't it?
Yeah.
Society
Well,
is influenced by faith.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful not to point a finger at them. You know, they actually somehow influenced by faith somehow. If I could give you one more minute, just to, I want to be understand our duty as neighbors. You know, this is quite important as a faith group or non-faith, to be honest with you.
Sure.
As a faith group, it's more our duty to look after people with no faith, as a neighbors or whatever. So what does the what commands you have in your book regarding neighbors? Just take a minute, please.
Yeah, the two great commandments, and this is, if you like, a distillation of the 10 commandments from the Old Testament, the Jewish scriptures. Jesus emphasised this. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind and soul and strength. And the second of the great commandments is you're to love your neighbour as yourself. As a recognition that, you know, that our neighbour can be absolutely anybody. You know, and he also mandated us to love our enemies. So our neighbour can be our enemy. So it's quite clear that there isn't a distinction to be made between anybody. So back to what we said a little bit earlier there, Ishak, about that's somebody that has committed a heinous crime, a horrible crime. That he is still my neighbour, she is still my neighbour, and I am compelled to love that person as myself. Now the myself bit is essentially recognising that, you know, as part of my relationship with God, I absolutely need to look after myself and have boundaries. We talked about boundaries earlier. So fundamentally, that's there. You know.
Same thing to you, sir. You know, when we read the life of the Prophet, one of the things he says that love for others what you love for yourself. You know, similar line what Mark said. So if you have any information on that, and just give us a minute.
Yeah, I think highly encouraged in Islam that we should look after our neighbor. So we have the teaching from Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that, you know, he said, if you eat full and your neighbor sleep hungry, your worship will not be accepted. And then we have defined, when Prophet Muhammad defined the neighbor, who is your neighbor? For each person has 40 houses from the right, 40 houses from the center, 40 houses from the left, 40 houses from behind. Now, I put myself on that question. Do I know my 40 house on the left? Do I know my 40 house on the front? Do I know my 40 house on the behind? Do I know 40 house from my right? I don't. Because of the social structure and because of the society we live in, because of, you know, and I think that's and collectively, not just me, I think we all fallen short on giving our rights to neighbor when it comes to practical aspect of it.
Sure.
So, first of all, we define that who is neighbor. Second of all, we define that your worship will not be accepted if they sleep hungry. Means it's a massive statement. It's a massive statement.
Thank you.
That
Thank you, guys. It's almost time is up.
So,
Thank you guys for your time. It's amazing to get you guys together and talk about the faith, and it's really amazing. So thank you for making time. Probably we'll do another one probably in the future. That would be
Inshallah,
very
God
interesting.
willing.
Dear brothers
Thank
and
you,
sisters, really interesting to hear from those two friends of mine, and we shared our faith, and we agreed on lots of things, to be honest with you, and we could do lots of good things together as well. So if we said anything wrong, please do forgive us. We're learning and we're trying to share the good values. So see you next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.